The winter wind howled through the barren trees surrounding the isolated farmstead. Nate Thompson stood at the edge of his property, watching as the first snow of the season began to fall, delicate flakes dancing in the twilight. The stable and backyard were already covered with a thin layer of frost, while only the yellow eyes of the barn lantern glowed dimly in the growing darkness. At 43, Nate had spent most of his life on this ancestral land, tending to livestock and poultry with quiet dedication. The farmhouse, weathered by decades of harsh winters and blazing summers, stood as a testament to his family's resilience. Beside him, as always, was Max, his massive Alaskan Malamute. The dog's thick, shaggy coat rippled in the breeze as he surveyed the property with watchful eyes, his loyalty unwavering. "Come on, boy," Nate murmured, patting Max's broad head. "Let's check on the horses before we turn in." The harvest had ended weeks ago, and the temperature had been steadily dropping. The farm was located in a wilderness area, a good 10 miles from the nearest small town, with few visitors venturing this far out, especially as winter approached. Nate preferred it this way. The solitude suited him, the silence broken only by animal sounds, and the occasional memory of his grandfather's voice echoing in his mind. The barn door creaked as Nate pushed it open, the warm, musty scent of hay and animals enveloping him. He methodically went about his evening routine, feeding the horses, checking their water, making sure the chickens were secure for the night. Max trotted alongside him, occasionally sniffing at corners or pausing to listen to sounds only he could hear. As Nate filled the last feed bucket, Max suddenly stopped. The dog's ears perked up, his body tensing. A low, rumbling growl emanated from deep in his chest as he stared fixedly at a pile of hay in the far corner of the barn. "What is it, boy?" Nate asked, reaching for the flashlight in his pocket. Max's growls intensified, but he didn't advance. Instead, he pawed at the ground nervously, as if torn between protecting his territory and keeping his distance. Nate approached the hay pile cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, as he shifted some of the straw with his boot, a faint shimmer caught his eye, something blue-green, trembling beneath the golden stalks. "Hello?" he called softly, kneeling down. "Anyone there?" The hay rustled, and to Nate's astonishment, a tiny figure emerged. A child, no more than 4 feet tall, with skin the color of a summer sky at dusk. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, glowed a brilliant orange, like harvest moons. She was clearly not human, though humanoid in form, with delicate limbs and features that seemed both alien and strangely beautiful. The small being cowered when she saw Max, her slender body convulsing with fear. She made a sound, not quite human speech, more like a melodic whimper, and tried to burrow back into the hay. "Easy there," Nate said, motioning for Max to stay back. "He won't hurt you, I promise." The dog, sensing Nate's command, sat down reluctantly, though his eyes never left the strange creature. Nate slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out some dried jerky he kept for treats. He held it out toward the tiny blue girl, his movements deliberate and gentle. "Are you hungry?" he asked, though he suspected she couldn't understand him. "It's okay. You're safe here." The alien child, for that was what she clearly was, stared at the offered food with those luminous orange eyes. After a moment's hesitation, she extended a trembling hand, snatched the jerky, and retreated back into the hay. Nate could hear her sniffing at it before taking a tentative bite. "You're not from around here, are you?" Nate said softly, settling back on his heels. "Let's call you Luna, because of your eyes. They remind me of the moon." The child didn't respond, but she didn't flee either. Progress, of a sort. Nate glanced outside. The snow was falling more heavily now, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. He couldn't leave this strange little being out in the cold barn all night, regardless of what planet she might hail from. "Come on," he said, extending his hand palm up. "Let's get you somewhere warmer." Luna, the name seemed to fit her, didn't take his hand, but she did emerge further from the hay when Nate backed away. Max growled again, and she froze, those moon-bright eyes wide with terror. "Max, outside," Nate commanded firmly. The dog whined in protest but obeyed, padding reluctantly to the barn door and out into the snow. With Max temporarily removed from the equation, Nate managed to coax Luna into following him to the converted cattle stall that he'd repurposed as a storage area. It was small, but well insulated, with a workbench and some old furniture. Most importantly, it had a small wood stove that Nate quickly lit, filling the space with welcome heat. He found a clean blanket in one of the storage trunks and offered it to Luna, who accepted it with obvious relief, wrapping the thick wool around her shoulders. Her clothes, if they could be called that, were tattered and strange, made of a material Nate couldn't identify, with an iridescent quality that caught the light. "Hungry?" Nate asked, pantomiming eating. Luna tilted her head, watching him intently. Nate left her briefly to fetch some bread and warm milk from the house, returning to find her exactly where he'd left her, huddled by the stove. The next 2 days passed in a curious dance of cautious interaction. Luna gradually became more comfortable with Nate's presence, accepting food and water, though she still wouldn't let him come too close. She slept curled tightly in her blanket, one hand always clutching a small crystal pendant that hung around her neck, a translucent gem that occasionally emitted a soft orange glow. Nate kept Max outside, or in the house during this time, sensing that Luna's fear of the dog was profound. When he examined her more closely, from a respectful distance, he noticed bruises on her arms and legs, and a half-healed cut across her forehead. Something, or someone, had hurt this child, and recently, on the third morning, Nate decided it was time to try bridging the gap between Luna and Max. The dog had been patient, but Nate could tell he was confused and somewhat jealous of the attention being paid to the newcomer. "We're going to have a visitor," Nate told Luna as he brought her breakfast. He mimed a large, furry animal, then pointed to the door. "Max, dog, friend." Luna's eyes widened, and she shook her head vehemently, clutching her crystal pendant. "He won't hurt you," Nate assured her, keeping his voice gentle. "Max is good, kind." She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't hide under the blanket either. Nate took that as a small victory. He brought Max in on a leash, keeping him at a distance from Luna. The dog sniffed the air, but remained calm under Nate's firm grip. Luna pressed herself against the wall, watching Max with undisguised terror. "It's okay," Nate said to both of them. "Max, sit." The dog obeyed, settling onto his haunches, though his intelligent eyes remained fixed on Luna. Nate rewarded him with a treat, then looked at Luna. "See, he listens, he's gentle." The session lasted only a few minutes before Luna's trembling became too pronounced, and Nate led Max back outside. But it was a start. Over the next few days, he repeated the exercise, each time allowing Max to stay a little longer, to move a little closer to Luna. Progress was slow, but steady. Luna began to watch Max with curiosity mingled with her fear. She would imitate Nate's commands, "Sit," "Stay," in her musical voice, seeming to understand that these words gave her some control over the situation. Then, one morning, everything changed. Nate was chopping wood near the barn when he heard a faint buzzing sound overhead. Looking up, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A small, metallic drone hovering above the farmyard. It wasn't like any drone he'd seen before, with an oddly organic shape and pulsing lights along its underside. Before he could react, the drone dropped a small object into the snow and zoomed away, disappearing over the tree line. Nate approached the object cautiously. It was a device of some kind, about the size of his palm, with a blinking red light and a symbol etched into its surface that resembled Luna's crystal pendant. A tracking beacon. Nate's stomach tightened. Someone, or something, was looking for Luna. And judging by her injuries and fear, whoever it was didn't have her best interests at heart. He hurried back to the converted stall where Luna was playing with some colored pencils he'd given her. When she saw his expression, she dropped the pencils, her orange eyes widening with alarm. "We need to hide," Nate said urgently, gathering up a few essentials. "Someone's coming." Whether she understood his words or just his tone. Luna immediately reached for her pendant, clutching it tightly. She followed Nate without hesitation as he led her to the hayloft in the back of the main barn, a more secluded hiding place than the stall. "Stay here," he told her, helping her burrow into the loose hay. "I'll be back soon." Max waited at the bottom of the ladder, his ears forward, body tense. Nate patted the dog's head, then went to the house to retrieve his hunting rifle. He checked that it was loaded, then returned to the barn, positioning himself where he could see both the entrance and the hayloft where Luna was hidden. The wait wasn't long. Less than an hour later, Nate heard the distinctive hum of engines, not the familiar rumble of trucks or cars, but a higher-pitched whine that seemed to vibrate the air itself. A shadow passed over the farmyard as a vehicle descended from the sky, a hovercraft of some kind, sleek and predatory, with no markings Nate recognized. 3 figures emerged from the craft. They were humanoid, but clearly not human, with proportions that were slightly off and movements too fluid to be natural. They wore form-fitting black suits that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and each carried what Nate could only assume was a weapon. Long, thin devices that hummed with energy. Max growled low in his throat, every muscle tensed for action. Nate placed a restraining hand on the dog's back, willing him to stay quiet. The lead figure approached the farmhouse, while the other 2 began methodically scanning the property with handheld devices. One of them paused, turning slowly toward the barn where Nate and Max were hidden. "Life signs detected," it announced in a voice that was too smooth, too perfect. 2 beings. One corresponds to target parameters. The leader turned, fixing glowing blue eyes on the barn. "Farm dweller," it called out, its English flawless, but oddly accented. "We know you harbor valuable property that does not belong to you. Surrender it, and you will not be harmed." Nate's grip tightened on his rifle. "There's no property here but mine," he called back, "and I don't take kindly to trespassers." The leader made a gesture, and the other 2 spread out, flanking the barn entrance. "The escaped specimen is extremely valuable. Hand it over, and you will be compensated for your trouble." "She's not a specimen," Nate said, anger rising in his chest. "She's a child." The leader's expression didn't change, but its tone hardened. "The female is the property of the consortium. Interfering with retrieval is a serious offense. Final warning, surrender the asset or face consequences." Nate raised his rifle. "I've given my final warning too. Get off my land." For a moment, everything was still. Then, all 3 hunters raised their weapons in unison. Max, unable to contain himself any longer, burst from the barn with a ferocious bark, charging directly at the nearest intruder. "Max, no!" Nate shouted, but it was too late. The hunter fired, a pulse of blue-white energy streaking through the air. It struck Max in the shoulder, sending the dog tumbling with a pained yelp. Nate fired back immediately, the crack of his rifle echoing across the farmyard. The bullet struck the hunter's weapon, shattering it in a shower of sparks. Chaos erupted. The other 2 hunters opened fire, forcing Nate to duck back into the barn. He fired again, more to keep them at bay than with any hope of hitting them. Outside, Max struggled to his feet, blood matting his thick fur, and lunged again at the nearest hunter. Then, from the hayloft, came a sound unlike anything Nate had ever heard, a high, keening wail that seemed to vibrate the very air. A brilliant orange light flooded the barn, pouring from where Luna was hidden. Nate looked up to see Luna standing at the edge of the loft, her crystal pendant blazing like a miniature sun between her hands. Her eyes, normally so fearful, now burned with the same fierce light as the crystal. The wailing sound came from her, a song of rage and protection that made Nate's skin prickle. A wave of energy pulsed outward from the crystal, visible as a ripple in the air. When it reached the hunters, they staggered backward, as if struck by a physical blow. Their weapons sparked and went dead in their hands. "Inhibitor field activated," one of them said, voice suddenly distorted. "Systems failing." The leader looked up at Luna, its perfect features contorting with something like fear. "The shard! It has bonded with her. Retreat! Signal the mothership." The hunters scrambled back toward their hovercraft, movements now jerky and uncoordinated. As they reached the vehicle, Luna's cry reached a crescendo, and another pulse of energy struck the craft. Its engines sputtered and died, leaving it dead and dark on the snow-covered ground. The hunters didn't hesitate. They abandoned their disabled craft and fled into the surrounding forest, quickly disappearing among the trees. Luna's cry faded, and the light from her crystal dimmed. She swayed on her feet, then collapsed in the hay, the pendant falling from her tiny hands to dangle once more around her neck. Nate wanted to go to her immediately, but Max's pained whine drew his attention first. The dog lay in the snow, his white fur stained crimson where the energy pulse had struck him. The wound wasn't bleeding heavily, but Max's breathing was labored, his eyes glazed with pain. "Hang on, boy," Nate murmured, kneeling beside his faithful companion. He examined the wound carefully, a burn rather than a laceration, deep but not life-threatening if treated quickly. He scooped the massive dog into his arms, staggering slightly under the weight, and carried him into the barn. After settling Max on a clean bed of straw, Nate climbed to the hayloft. Luna lay exactly where she had fallen, her blue skin pale, almost gray. The crystal around her neck pulsed weakly, in rhythm with her shallow breathing. "Luna," Nate called softly, touching her shoulder. "Luna, wake up." Her moon-bright eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on his face. She made a small, questioning sound. "You're safe," Nate assured her. "You saved us, but Max is hurt. Can you come down?" At the mention of Max, Luna's eyes widened, and she sat up quickly, too quickly. She swayed, and Nate steadied her with a gentle hand. "Easy," he said. "Take it slow." He helped her down the ladder, supporting her when her legs threatened to give way. When she saw Max lying in the straw, bleeding and in pain, Luna froze. Nate expected fear, perhaps even satisfaction at seeing the creature that had terrified her, now brought low. Instead, to his astonishment, Luna's face crumpled with concern. She made a soft, crooning sound and moved toward Max, her earlier weakness seemingly forgotten. Max lifted his head weakly as she approached, but didn't growl or show any sign of aggression. Luna knelt beside him, her small hands hovering over his wounded shoulder. She looked up at Nate, her expression questioning. "He needs help," Nate said, miming bandaging a wound. "I need to clean it and stop the bleeding." Luna nodded, surprising Nate with this clear sign of understanding. She remained by Max's side, gently stroking his head, while Nate gathered medical supplies from the house. When he returned, he found Luna singing softly to Max, a melodic, soothing sound that seemed to calm the injured dog. Together, they tended to Max's wound. Luna handed Nate supplies as he needed them, seeming to anticipate what he required without being told. Her touch was gentle as she helped hold Max still during the painful parts of the treatment. By the time they finished, night had fallen completely, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. The hunters hadn't returned, But Nate knew they were likely regrouping, perhaps calling for reinforcements. The disabled hovercraft still sat in his yard, a silent reminder that their troubles were far from over. "We should move to the house," Nate told Luna, gesturing toward the farmhouse. "Warmer, safer." Luna nodded, but looked worriedly at Max, who was now sleeping, his breathing steadier but still labored. "He comes too," Nate assured her, and together they rigged a makeshift sled using an old tarp. They carefully moved Max onto it, and Nate pulled it through the snow to the house, Luna walking beside them, one hand resting protectively on Max's back. Inside, Nate built up the fire in the living room wood stove and made a comfortable bed for Max on the rug before it. Luna helped arrange blankets around the dog, her movements now confident and purposeful. When Max was settled, she sat beside him, continuing her soft, melodic humming. Nate prepared a simple meal, soup and bread, and brought a bowl to Luna. She accepted it gratefully, though she never moved from Max's side. As she ate, Nate noticed that her crystal pendant was glowing again, pulsing gently with a warm orange light. "What is that?" he asked, pointing to the crystal. "It's special, isn't it?" Luna touched the pendant, her expression solemn. She held it out toward Nate, not removing it from around her neck, but allowing him to see it more closely. The crystal was like nothing Nate had ever seen. Not quite solid, not quite liquid, with depths that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Within its heart, tiny motes of light danced and swirled, like stars in a miniature galaxy. "Heart shard," Luna said suddenly, her voice musical but the words clearly English. "Mother gave—" Nate started, surprised both by her speech and by what she'd said. "You can talk? You understand me?" Luna nodded slowly. "Learning. Listening." She gestured to her head, then to Nate and Max. "Words come. Slow." "That's amazing," Nate said, genuinely impressed. "And this," he pointed to the crystal, "is a heart shard? From your mother?" Luna nodded again, her expression turning sad. "Mother gone. Gave shard. Said, protect." "It certainly did that," Nate agreed. "You protected us. Thank you." Luna's orange eyes welled with tears. "Max hurt. Because Luna—" "No," Nate said firmly. "Max was hurt because bad people came. You saved him. You saved both of us." Luna didn't look entirely convinced, but she returned her attention to Max, gently stroking his thick fur. To Nate's amazement, the dog leaned into her touch, his tail thumping weakly against the floor. "He likes you," Nate said, smiling. "I think you've made a friend." Luna's expression brightened, and she leaned down to press her forehead against Max's. The dog responded by lifting his head just enough to lick her cheek, drawing a startled laugh from the alien child, a sound like silver bells. That night, Luna refused to leave Max's side, eventually falling asleep curled against his uninjured flank, one small blue hand buried in his thick white fur. Nate covered them both with a blanket before settling into his armchair nearby, rifle across his lap. He dozed fitfully, waking at every sound, but the hunters did not return. Dawn broke clear and cold, sunlight glinting off the snow-covered landscape. Max was much improved, managing to stand and walk to the door when nature called, though his movements were stiff and clearly painful. Luna shadowed him anxiously, as if afraid he might collapse at any moment. While they ate breakfast, Nate tried to learn more about Luna and her pursuers. Her vocabulary was limited, but her comprehension seemed excellent, and she was learning new words at an astonishing rate. "The hunters," Nate said. "Why do they want you?" Luna's expression darkened. "Luna. Special. Shard bond." She touched her pendant. "Only Luna can use. Hunters want power." "What kind of power?" Luna frowned, searching for words. "Energy. Control machines. Make walls in air. She mimed a barrier with her hands. Many uses, bad uses, for hunters. And these hunters, who are they? Where are they from? Consortium, Luna said, the word clearly difficult for her. Far stars. Take. Special ones. Make work. Make fight. She touched her bruises, wincing. Luna, escape. Find ship. Come here. You're a refugee, Nate realized. And they're slave traders. Luna nodded solemnly, recognizing the word. Slaves. Yes. Many like Luna. Different. Kinds. She gestured to indicate varying heights and forms. All special. All taken. Nate's jaw tightened. Well, they're not taking you back, I promise. Luna's orange eyes studied his face, as if gauging his sincerity. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded once, decisively. Nate, good. Luna, stay. Yes, Nate agreed. Luna, stay. Max woofed softly, as if adding his own approval to the arrangement. And Luna laughed again, that bell-like sound that seemed to brighten the whole room. Throughout the day, Nate kept watch for any sign of the hunters returning. But the forest remained quiet. The disabled hovercraft still sat in the yard, slowly being buried under fresh falling snow. Nate considered examining it more closely, but decided against it. Better not to risk triggering any kind of tracking or alert system. Luna spent the day alternating between caring for Max and exploring the farmhouse with undisguised curiosity. She was particularly fascinated by Nate's books, running her fingers over the printed words as if trying to absorb their meaning through touch alone. By afternoon, she was attempting to read aloud, sounding out simple words with careful concentration. As dusk approached, Nate noticed Luna growing increasingly anxious, her gaze repeatedly drawn to the windows, her hands often straying to her crystal pendant. "What's wrong?" he asked her. "Are they coming back?" Luna shook her head. "Not yet, but—" She frowned, struggling with the words. "Shard calls. Others coming. Big ship." She pointed upward, toward the sky. "Soon." Nate's heart sank. More hunters. Different, bigger, stronger. Luna's expression was grim. "Looking for Shard. For Luna." "How long do we have?" Luna closed her eyes, her fingers tightening around her pendant. 3 days. Maybe 4. 3 days. Nate considered their options. They could try to run. But where would they go? The nearest town was small and offered little in the way of protection. The authorities would be worse than useless. They'd either dismiss his story as the ravings of a madman or, worse, believe him and take Luna away for study. No, they would have to make their stand here, on Nate's land. But they wouldn't be entirely without resources. "Luna," he said carefully, "your Shard. Can you control it? Use it when you want to. Not just when you're scared or angry." Luna bit her lip, considering. "Luna, try. Need practice." "Then that's what we'll do," Nate decided. "We have 3 days to prepare. We'll make the most of them." The next morning, after checking that Max was continuing to improve, Nate began making preparations. He moved essential supplies into the root cellar beneath the house, a small, sturdy space originally designed for storing vegetables through the winter, but which could serve as a shelter if needed. He checked and cleaned all his firearms, taking inventory of his ammunition. Luna watched these preparations with solemn eyes, but didn't interfere. Instead, she focused on her own task, learning to control the power of her heart shard. She would sit cross-legged on the living room floor, the crystal cradled in her palms. Her eyes closed in concentration as she tried to summon its glow at will. Progress was slow at first. The crystal would flicker erratically, sometimes flaring brightly enough to cast shadows, other times remaining stubbornly dark. Luna would emerge from these sessions exhausted, her blue skin damp with exertion. But she persisted. And by the end of the second day, She could maintain a steady glow for several minutes at a time. By the third day, she was able to direct small pulses of energy towards specific targets, making light bulbs flicker or causing the radio to turn on and off without touching it. "Luna, strong," she told Nate proudly, demonstrating her newfound control. "Luna, protect!" "We'll protect each other," Nate corrected gently. "All three of us." Max, now able to move about with only slight discomfort, woofed in agreement. The dog had become Luna's constant companion, following her from room to room, sleeping beside her bed at night. The fear that had initially defined their relationship was gone, replaced by a bond that seemed to grow stronger by the hour. On the fourth day, they felt it, a vibration that ran through the house, rattling windows and dishes. Outside, birds took flight in startled flocks from the surrounding forest. Max's hackles rose, and he growled deep in his throat. "They're here," Nate said grimly, reaching for his rifle. Luna nodded, her face set in determined lines. She clutched her pendant, which was already beginning to glow in response to her emotions. "Remember the plan," Nate told her. "Stay hidden until I call for you. If things go badly, you run. Understand?" Luna shook her head stubbornly. "Luna, stay. Fight with Nate. With Max." Nate wanted to argue, to insist that her safety was the priority. But the look in those moon-bright eyes stopped him. Luna had been running, hiding, living in fear for too long. She needed to make this stand as much as he did. "All right," he conceded, "but be careful. Both of you." They moved to the front porch, Nate positioning himself by the railing, rifle ready. Max stood alert at his side, his injured shoulder still bandaged, but his stance strong and steady. Luna remained slightly behind them, one hand on Max's back, the other holding her now glowing pendant. The vibration intensified, and then they saw it, a massive ship descending from the cloud-covered sky. Unlike the sleek, predatory lines of the hunter's hovercraft, this vessel was bulky and functional, its surface scarred and pitted from long use. It settled in the field beyond the farmyard, engines thrumming with barely contained power. A hatch opened in the ship's side, and figures began to emerge, a dozen, then 24, forming a loose perimeter around the vessel. Unlike the previous hunters, these beings varied widely in appearance. Some were humanoid, others decidedly not, with forms that defied easy description. All were armed, carrying weapons similar to those the first hunters had used. One figure detached from the group and approached the farmhouse, a tall, slender being with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes like polished black stones. It wore an elaborate harness studded with glowing crystals, similar to Luna's pendant, though none shone with the same vibrant orange light. The being stopped at the edge of the yard, just beyond comfortable rifle range. "Inhabitant of this dwelling," it called, its voice oddly melodious despite the harsh translator overtones. "I am Commander Zerval of the Consortium Recovery Fleet. You harbor property stolen from our organization. Return it immediately, and your interference will be overlooked." "There's no stolen property here," Nate called back. "Just me, my dog, and my ward, who is under my protection." The commander's expression didn't change, but the crystals in its harness pulsed more rapidly. "The female child and the shard she carries are valuable consortium assets. Their retrieval is non-negotiable. Comply, or we will employ maximum force." "You're slavers," Nate said bluntly, "and Luna is a child, not property. She stays with me." The commander's black eyes narrowed. "You know nothing of our ways or our rights. The female was bred for a purpose. The shard is attuned to her genetic signature. Together, they represent years of research and considerable investment. We will not leave without them." Behind Nate, Luna stepped forward, her crystal blazing now. "Luna, not slave!" she cried, her musical voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Luna free!" The commander's attention shifted to her, and something like satisfaction crossed its alien features. Specimen L7. Your function is to serve the consortium. Your opinions are irrelevant. It raised a hand, on which a crystal, similar to Luna's, glinted dully. The shard recognizes its master. Return to your rightful place. The crystal in the commander's hand pulsed, sending a beam of sickly green light toward Luna. When it touched her pendant, the orange glow flickered and dimmed, and Luna gasped in pain. Max reacted instantly, launching himself from the porch with a ferocious bark, charging directly at the commander. Nate fired his rifle, aiming not at the alien but at the crystal in its hand. The bullet struck true, shattering the green gem in a shower of crystalline fragments. The commander howled in rage or pain. Nate couldn't tell which, and staggered backward. The perimeter guards raised their weapons, energy pulses streaking through the air toward the farmhouse. "Down!" Nate shouted, pulling Luna to the porch floor as pulses struck the railing and siding, splintering wood and shattering windows. Max dodged most of the barrage, but took a glancing hit to his already injured shoulder, yelping in pain. Luna's cry of distress when she saw Max hurt again was like nothing Nate had ever heard. Raw and primal, filled with rage and protective fury. Her pendant blazed suddenly brighter than the sun, forcing Nate to shield his eyes. "Luna, protect!" she screamed, and a wave of orange energy exploded outward from her small form, expanding in a perfect sphere that engulfed the farmhouse and yard. When it reached the consortium forces, their weapons died in their hands. The crystals in their harnesses and equipment went dark. Even the massive ship's engines sputtered and fell silent. In the sudden quiet, Luna's voice rang out, stronger and clearer than Nate had ever heard it. "Go away," she commanded. "Never come back. Luna free. Luna choose family." The commander stared at her, black eyes wide with what might have been shock. "Impossible," it said. "The shard cannot. You cannot." "Luna can," she insisted, stepping forward, her pendant still blazing. "Luna did. Now go." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the commander raised its hands in a gesture that might have been surrender or merely acknowledgement. "The consortium will remember this defiance," it said, its voice cold. "And the one who sheltered you." "The consortium will leave us alone," Nate countered, rifle still raised. "If it knows what's good for it. Luna's not the only one with powerful friends." It was a bluff, of course. Nate had no powerful allies, no backup plan if the aliens decided to press their attack. But sometimes, confidence was enough. The commander studied him, those black eyes unreadable. Finally, it inclined its head slightly. "We withdraw, for now." It turned and walked back toward the ship, the other aliens falling in behind it. Nate, Luna, and Max watched in tense silence as the consortium forces reboarded their vessel. The ship's engines coughed back to life. Apparently, Luna's energy pulse had only temporarily disabled them, and it rose ponderously into the sky, soon disappearing among the clouds. Only when the vibration had faded completely did Nate lower his rifle. "Are they really gone?" he asked Luna. "Or will they come back?" Luna closed her eyes, her fingers tight around her pendant. After a moment, she nodded. "Gone. Far. Shard says, safe now." Max limped back to the porch, whining softly. Luna immediately knelt beside him, examining his fresh injury with gentle hands. "Not bad," she pronounced. "Luna help." To Nate's astonishment, she held her pendant against Max's wounded shoulder. The crystal glowed softly, and Max's tense muscles visibly relaxed. When Luna removed the pendant, the injury looked days rather than minutes old, already beginning to heal. "Luna learn," she said, smiling up at Nate. "Heart shard not just fight, also heal." "That's incredible," Nate said, kneeling beside them. "You're incredible." Luna ducked her head, her blue cheeks darkening with what Nate realized was a blush. Luna. And that's more than enough, Nate assured her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. More than enough for us. Max woofed in agreement, pressing his large head against Luna's side. She laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his thick fur. In that moment, watching the alien child and his dog embrace like old friends, Nate felt something shift and settle in his heart. His quiet, solitary life had been upended in the space of a few days, transformed by the arrival of this extraordinary child. There would be challenges ahead. Luna would need to learn more about her new home, about human society. They would need to be vigilant, in case the consortium decided to try again. But they would face those challenges together, the three of them, a family, unlikely as it might seem. That evening, as snow began to fall once more, they sat before the wood stove in the living room. Luna was curled up against Max's side, reading slowly from one of Nate's old children's books, sounding out the words with careful concentration. The dog watched her with evident adoration, his tail thumping gently against the rug. Nate watched them, a mug of hot coffee warming his hands. Outside, the disabled hovercraft was now completely buried under snow, a problem for another day. The farmhouse windows had been temporarily patched with plastic sheeting, keeping out the worst of the cold until proper repairs could be made. "Nate?" Luna called, looking up from her book. "What this word?" She pointed to a passage on the page. "Family," Nate told her, moving to sit beside them. "It means people who belong together, who take care of each other." Luna considered this, her orange eyes thoughtful. "Luna, Nate, Max," she said slowly. "Family?" "Yes," Nate said, his throat suddenly tight with emotion. "We're a family now." Luna smiled, a radiant expression that seemed to light her from within. She touched her pendant, which glowed warmly in response. "Family," she repeated, the word like a prayer on her lips. "Luna like—" Outside, the winter wind howled through the barren trees, driving the snow into drifts against the farmhouse walls. But inside, before the crackling fire, three very different beings had found something precious and rare, a place to belong, a bond that transcended species and origin, a love that asked nothing but offered everything. A family. Snow fell silently, covering the land in a pristine blanket of white. In the farmhouse on the hill, lights glowed warmly through patched windows, a beacon in the gathering darkness. And if anyone had been watching, any passing traveler or curious neighbor, they might have glimpsed, through those windows, an unlikely trio, a weathered man, a massive white dog, and a small blue child with eyes like harvest moons, all gathered before the fire, bound together by something stronger than blood or species or the vastness of space itself. They might have wondered at such a sight, this strange assembly of beings, but they would not have questioned the love that radiated from that circle of light, as palpable and warming as the fire that burned in the hearth. For love, like family, takes many forms, and sometimes the most beautiful families are those we build ourselves, one brave choice at a time. Luna had traveled across the stars to find hers. Nate had only needed to open his door, and his heart, and Max, faithful, protective Max, had learned that sometimes the things we fear most deserve our greatest love. As the night deepened and stars appeared in the clearing sky, some of which might have been Luna's distant home, the unlikely family settled into sleep, safe in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. The days that followed settled into a new routine for the unlikely family. Each morning, Nate would wake early to tend to the animals, often finding Luna already up, practicing with her crystal pendant in the living room, its orange glow painting the walls with warm light. Max would alternate between following Nate on his chores and staying close to Luna. his protective instincts now fully transferred to include the small alien child. Luna's command of English improved rapidly, her quick mind absorbing new words and concepts with remarkable speed. She proved to be insatiably curious about Earth and its inhabitants, peppering Nate with questions about everything from chickens to weather patterns to the pictures of his ancestors that hung on the farmhouse walls. "Your grandfather?" she asked one evening, pointing to a faded photograph of an older man standing beside a much younger Nate, both dressed in fishing gear and grinning broadly, a string of trout between them. "Yes," Nate confirmed, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. "Grandpa Joe. He taught me everything I know about this farm, about living off the land." "He looked kind," Luna observed, studying the weathered face in the photograph. "Like you." "He was the best man I've ever known," Nate said softly. "He always told me to trust my instincts, to believe in doing the right thing even when it's difficult." He glanced at Luna. "I think he would have liked you." Luna beamed at this, clearly pleased by the comparison. "Luna wished meet him." "Me too, kiddo, me too." The disabled consortium hovercraft remained where it had landed, gradually disappearing beneath the deepening winter snow. Nate considered trying to salvage parts from it. The technology was far beyond anything available on Earth, but ultimately decided against disturbing it. Better not to risk activating any dormant systems that might alert the consortium to their location. Instead, he focused on making the farmhouse more secure. He repaired the damaged windows and reinforced the doors, installed additional locks, and set up a simple alarm system using fishing line and tin cans around the perimeter of the property. It wasn't high-tech, but it would warn them if anyone or anything approached. Luna contributed to these security measures in her own way, using her growing control over the heart shard to create what she called watching lights, tiny motes of orange energy that she stationed at key points around the farm. These miniature sentinels would alert her if they detected any technology more advanced than Nate's old tractor. As winter deepened, they faced more mundane challenges. The heavy snow made trips to town increasingly difficult, limiting their access to supplies. Nate was grateful for his well-stocked pantry and freezer, but fresh produce became a luxury rather than a staple. Luna, however, proved surprisingly adaptable to Earth food, though she had definite preferences. She loved anything sweet. Honey was a particular favorite, and developed a passion for the canned peaches that Nate had put up the previous summer. Meat she approached cautiously at first, but eventually came to enjoy Nate's venison stew, picking out the carrots but devouring the tender meat with evident relish. Max's wound healed completely under Luna's careful ministrations. She would hold her pendant against his shoulder each evening, the crystal's glow seeming to seep into the dog's flesh, accelerating the natural healing process. Within 2 weeks, there was no sign that he had ever been injured, his thick white coat growing back over the previously scarred area. Luna's healing abilities weren't limited to Max. When Nate cut his hand while chopping firewood, she insisted on treating it with her pendant, watching with solemn concentration as the deep gash closed before their eyes, leaving only a faint pink line that faded to nothing by the following day. "The shard remembers life," she explained, when Nate asked how her healing worked. "Tells body how to be whole again." "That's an amazing gift," Nate said, flexing his healed hand in wonder. "You could help a lot of people with that ability." Luna's expression grew troubled. "Consortium want Luna use shard for bad things. Control machines. Make weapons work. Break shields." She touched the pendant protectively. "Not for helping, for hurting." "But you're using it for good," Nate pointed out. "That's what matters, how you choose to use your gifts." Luna considered this, her orange eyes thoughtful. "Luna, choose good," she said finally, with firm conviction. Like Nate teach, during the long winter evenings, they established a ritual of learning and sharing. Nate would teach Luna about Earth, its geography, history, and cultures, using his small collection of books and his own knowledge. In return, Luna would tell him about the stars, about the various beings that inhabited what she called the wide spaces, and about her own people. Her memories of her homeworld were fragmentary. She had been very young when the consortium took her, but she recalled a planet of towering crystal formations and purple skies, where beings like her lived in harmonious communities, their technology integrated seamlessly with the natural world. "All gone now," she said sadly one night, as they sat before the fire. Consortium came, took special ones, children with shard bond. Her small fingers curled around her pendant. "Mother, hide Luna, but find later. Take Luna to Big Ship. Many tests, many hurts." Nate's heart ached at the thought of this child. Any child, subjected to such treatment. "How did you escape?" he asked gently. Luna's expression brightened slightly. "Other slave help. Not like Luna. Different kind. Big. Strong. Scales." She mimed a hulking form with her hands. "Break Luna's cage. Give small ship. Say fly far, little one. Luna fly until ship break. Land here." "And I'm very glad you did," Nate assured her, reaching out to squeeze her small hand. "Very glad indeed." Max, lying at Luna's feet, thumped his tail in agreement, earning a bright smile from the alien child. As winter slowly gave way to spring, and the snow began to melt from the fields and forests surrounding the farm, they ventured out more frequently. Luna was enchanted by the gradual awakening of the natural world, the first crocuses pushing through the retreating snow, the return of birds to the bare trees, the increasing warmth of the sun. She would spend hours in the garden once the ground thawed enough for planting, helping Nate prepare the soil and sow seeds, her blue hands gentle with the tiny plants. Her presence seemed to invigorate the growing things. Vegetables planted by Luna sprouted faster and grew more vigorously than those Nate tended alone. "Plants like shard energy," she explained when Nate commented on this phenomenon. "Like sun, but different, makes strong." With the changing season came new considerations about Luna's future. She couldn't remain hidden on the farm forever. Eventually, they would need to introduce her to the wider world, or at least to a carefully selected few who might help protect her. Nate had a cousin who worked for a research university several states away, a physicist who had always been open-minded about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Perhaps she could provide Luna with some form of legitimate documentation, a cover story that would allow her to move more freely in human society. But such plans remained tentative, discussed in hypothetical terms during their evening talks. For now, the farm provided all they needed: safety, sustenance, and the space for their unusual family to grow stronger together. Then, on a mild spring morning, as Nate and Luna were planting the last of the season's tomato seedlings, Max began to bark, not his usual greeting or warning bark, but a sound of pure joy. They looked up to see the dog racing toward the edge of the forest, where a figure had emerged from the trees. Nate reached instinctively for the rifle he kept nearby these days, but relaxed when he saw that the newcomer was a dog, a large, white-furred animal that looked remarkably like Max. The two dogs met in a flurry of wagging tails and playful leaps, clearly delighted with each other. "Friend of Max?" Luna asked, watching the canine reunion with evident pleasure. "I don't think so," Nate said, puzzled. "Max has been with me since he was a pup, and I've never seen this dog before." As they watched, the strange dog broke away from Max and approached them cautiously. As it drew closer, Nate realized it wasn't a dog at all, at least, not an Earth dog. Its eyes were a brilliant violet, and 6 legs supported its canine-like body instead of the usual 4. Luna gasped, her pendant flaring briefly with orange light. "Kella!" she exclaimed, dropping to her knees as the creature bounded the last few feet to her, covering her blue face with enthusiastic licks. "Kella here!" "You know this dog?" Nate asked, bemused by the reunion playing out before him. Luna nodded, her face radiant with joy as she embraced the six-legged creature. Kella from home! Luna's friend before Consortium take... How Kella find Luna? The creature, Kella, pulled back from Luna's embrace and sat on its haunches. Violet eyes fixed intently on the pendant around her neck. It made a series of chirping sounds that reminded Nate of birdsong. Shard call, Luna translated, looking up at Nate with wonder. Kella say heart shards sing across stars. Others here too, coming to find. Others? Nate asked, a familiar tension returning to his shoulders. What others? More Consortium hunters? Kella chirped again, and Luna shook her head, her expression brightening further. No, Luna's people, survivors, found new home, far from Consortium, looking for lost ones. Hope and apprehension warred in Nate's chest. If Luna's people had truly survived, if they had established a new colony beyond the Consortium's reach, then perhaps she could rejoin her own kind, live among those who understood her nature and abilities. But the thought of losing her, of their unlikely family being broken apart, sent a sharp pain through his heart. Luna seemed to sense his conflicted emotions. She stood and took his hand, her orange eyes solemn. Luna not leave, she said firmly. Luna stay with Nate, with Max. But good to know others live. Good to know home still exists, somewhere. Relief flooded through Nate, though he tried to hide the depth of it. Are you sure? He asked. Don't you want to be with your own people? Luna gestured to him, to Max, to Kella, who was now cautiously sniffing noses with the earth dog. These Luna's people, she said simply. This Luna's home. Over the next few days, they learned more about the situation through Kella, who could communicate directly with Luna through a combination of chirps, mental impressions, and the resonance of Luna's heart shard. The six-legged creature had been sent as a scout, one of many dispatched throughout the galaxy to locate survivors of their world's fall to the Consortium. A small colony of Luna's people had established themselves on a distant moon, carefully hidden from Consortium detection. They had developed technology that allowed them to track the unique energy signatures of heart shards, which was how they had located Luna. Others come soon, Luna told Nate one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Kella and Max playing in the yard before them. Small ship, to see Luna safe, to bring news. And will you go with them, when they come? Nate asked, trying and failing to keep his voice neutral. Luna shook her head firmly. Luna told Kella, this home now. She leaned against Nate's side, her small form warm in the cooling evening air. But good to see others. Good to know not alone in stars. You were never alone, Nate reminded her gently. Not from the moment you landed here. Luna smiled up at him, her orange eyes luminous in the fading light. Luna no, best accident, finding Nate and Max. Max, hearing his name, bounded up the porch steps and flopped down at their feet, panting happily. Kella followed more gracefully, arranging her 6 legs in a neat curl beside Luna. The 4 of them sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and stars began to appear in the clear spring sky. Somewhere out there, Luna's people were coming, not to take her away, but to reconnect her with her heritage, to assure themselves of her safety, to expand their small circle of family, to include others who had survived against impossible odds. And Nate, watching Luna's face as she gazed up at the stars, her pendant glowing softly against her blue skin, felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. His quiet life had been transformed by the arrival of this extraordinary child. His definition of family expanded beyond anything he could have imagined. Whatever the future held, Consortium hunters, or peaceful visitors from the stars, the challenges of helping Luna navigate life on Earth, or the joy of watching her grow into her remarkable abilities, they would face it together. This unlikely family bound by something stronger than blood or species, or the vast distances between worlds. Max shifted closer to Luna, resting his large head on her lap. She stroked his thick fur absently, her other hand finding Nate's and holding tight. Kella chirped softly, violet eyes reflecting the emerging stars. "Family," Luna said, the word still holding a note of wonder in her musical voice. "Luna's family." "Always," Nate promised, squeezing her small hand gently. "No matter what comes next." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the darkening sky, a brief, brilliant passage that left a glowing trail in its wake. Luna's pendant flared in response, as if in greeting or recognition. A sign, perhaps, of things to come. A reminder that even in the vastness of space, connections could be made, bonds formed, love found in the most unexpected places. For now, though, there was just this moment. A man, a dog, an alien child, and her six-legged companion, sitting together on a farmhouse porch as night fell over the awakening earth. Not the family any of them had been born to, but the family they had chosen, the family they had built, one brave choice at a time. And in the end, that was all that mattered.